No matter if you're doing a PvE or PvP base or playing solo or with a squad, gardening and interacting with these mechanics properly and efficiently is going to be extremely important. And I'll get into all of the topics surrounding gardening and some of the things that you need to understand. I'll put timestamps down below if you want to jump around. And then also I'm going to start a new Discord. If you want to pop in there and ask any questions or discuss anything, just let me know. I also do really like to lay out things in like spreadsheet format when I'm talking about stuff, as you can see on the screen right now. And if you ever want any of those resources, you can also just pop into the Discord and ask me for them, no problem. But okay, so why is gardening so important in both PvE and PvP? It's going to be because you are going to need tons of plant resources no matter what you're doing in the game, whether it's going to be increasing your horses to their max stats, or summoning things in your tombs and your vermin nests and stuff like that. You need tons of resources to be able to farm a ton of things to help you scale as fast as possible. And basically, no matter what you're doing in large amounts, it's going to require some of these plant resources in some fashion. Even later on in the game, when you're doing your blood merlots, it's going to take a ton of grapes. So you see I have a row of grapes over here, and basically every plant in the game is going to be very beneficial to you to be able to farm it easily in your base as often as you would like and on cooldown when it cycles through growing. Which, by the way, a really common question that people have when it comes to gardening is how long does it take a plant to grow? After you harvest it, how long is it until it grows back? It's loosely about an hour of real lifetime. So I'll have a video playing on screen right now of a time lapse with a garden growing. And when I tested it, I didn't start the timer like exactly right after I harvested it. But for the plants, it was about 1 hour. And for the trees, if I remember right, it was somewhere around like an hour 40. But it's important to note that you may be playing on a server that doesn't have default settings. And I believe those things are adjustable a little bit. So if you're on default, the plants should be regrowing about every hour or so. And in order to start an effective garden, you're going to need to be acquiring a lot of seeds. Now, when you destroy a plant out in the natural V-Rising world, it's going to have an opportunity to drop a seed. It's somewhere around 2%, give or take. I've tried to do a sample size of a few thousand iterations of harvesting a plant, and I was getting somewhere between like 1.8 to 3.2, anywhere in there depending on kind of the iteration of testing. So I'm going to guess it's somewhere around 2.5% drop rate, which means if you harvest about 100 plants, you should expect about 2 or 3 seeds. And something extremely crucial, I may even timestamp this, but if you listen to anything in this video, listen to this. It is extremely crucial. If you are about to harvest a bunch of plants, let's say you go over to the cotton farm in Dunley and you're about to destroy a bunch of cotton, if at all possible, you want to make sure that this attribute right here, this resource yield, is not 100. You want this to be 110 or literally anything above 100, and I'll explain why. So right now, you'll see that I've got this bat leather bag, and it provides 10% resource yield. If I take that off and I go under attributes and I look at resource yield, now I'm at 100%. You do not want to be at 100% when you're going to be destroying plants that you really need, like the cotton farm. If you want something to yield seeds, and those seeds have a lot of value for you, you do not want to be at 100%. Now, there are a couple different ways you can get any boost to this 100%. Later on in the game, you're going to start to unlock some of these bags that will go ahead and give you a little bit of a boost. You can see this bat leather bag has a plus 10% resource yield. So that's this one right here at the leather working station, but there is also this pristine leather bag that also gives you a 10% resource yield. None of the other bags are going to give you that resource yield, so you're going to need to at least get to unlocking the pristine leather bag, which is going to be unlocked by killing this boss right here. It's 67 on brutal. Wilfred, the village elder, he's the one that transitions from a worker to a werewolf, depending on if it's day or night. And you can see right here, the reward for killing him is the pristine leather bag. So at that point, you won't need to worry so much about making sure you have worker blood on you, because just wearing the bag that you craft from unlocking it will give you at least a little bit of a boost to that resource yield. But otherwise, you're going to want to use literally any percent quality of worker blood. And to show you how crucial this is, let's go ahead and take off that bag and then not use the worker blood that I have right here in my inventory. So right now I just have the warrior, which means that if I look at attributes, I'm sitting at 100% resource yield. Now look at what's going to happen when I start farming the garden here. We'll wait until I get a seed to pop up. You'll see it down on the bottom left in slot 6, maybe 7 actually. Okay, there you go. I just had a cotton seed pop up right here in slot 7. Took me a while, had some bad RNG on getting seeds, but right there, I was able to finally get a seed to drop. And because I only have the baseline of 100% resource yield, I only drop 1 seed because the way the game rolls it is it procs 1 seed to drop. I have the baseline 1.0 resource yield, and I get 1 seed. But now, let's go ahead and simply add a 10% resource yield by putting our bag on. And now you can see right here, resource yield 110. Okay, now, the next seed that I get will show up in slot 6 here on my hotbar. And you'll notice, I don't get 1 seed, I get 2. So let's start over here. We'll start with the important stuff, the grapes and all that good stuff. Hopefully I don't have as bad of RNG as I did last time. Boom, right there. I didn't get 1 seed like I did with cotton. I got 2 seeds. And the reason that happens is because the way it's rolling when the drop procs is it drops 1 seed. But what it's going to do is you have a 110% resource yield. Well, with seeds, it can't drop 1.1 seeds. It's such a small number that it can't accurately reflect that percentage. So 1.1 seeds gets rounded up to 2 seeds. And now I just got 2 grape seeds when I was supposed to get 1. So if I wouldn't have been paying attention to making sure I'm not at that 100% resource yield, you are going to lose out on a ton of seeds, and you're going to really slow down the snowballing of your garden and being able to grow it as fast as possible on a new playthrough. So let me go ahead and unequip this bag, and let's reset these seeds here so that there's none on the hotbar. Okay, so what's going to happen early game is, okay, we're a little bit screwed and we can't get above 100% resource yield because we haven't unlocked the relevant bag that will help us out there. Well, what you can do is you can always get crappy worker blood. So look at this. I've got this crappy worker 8 blood. It's 22%. Let's go ahead and pop that. And then look what happens on the worker blood. The very first thing you get for worker blood is increased resource yield. Even though it was such a crappy percent of 22, I still get 14.6, which if I go into attributes here, it rounds to 115%. So I don't need the bag to go ahead and boost up over that 100%. Now, if I start gardening again, you will see that when a seed drops down there in slot 6 or 7, I'm going to get 2 seeds instead of 1 because I took the time to make sure I'm not at that baseline 100% yield. And there we go. As you can see, I just got a seed to pop up in slot 7 for the corrupted flower seed. And I dropped 2 instead of 1 because I was able to make sure I'm not at 100%. And you can do this in 2 different ways, as I just showed. Either you unlock the relevant bag that will increase the rate by 10%, or if you're a little bit more early game, you can just make sure you have even a crappy version of worker blood, and that will do just fine as well. But I wanted to cover this early in the guide because this is an extremely important mechanic to understand, especially if you're on a PvP server and you're trying to scale as fast as possible. Being able to have more seeds and a larger garden faster than the people you're going up against is going to be a huge advantage for you to start taking advantage of all the benefits you have available to you by having a large functionable garden. So that's one way that you can make sure you're acquiring seeds as optimally as possible in your base just by harvesting your own crops. But like I showed you on that information sheet, there are a lot of different ways that you can get seeds as well. You do want to make sure you're checking the different vendor areas in the game because they do have a trader in those areas that will sell seeds. And then you also want to be killing the relevant enemies when you're close to them, like the tree ants and stuff like that, because they can drop seeds as well. And sometimes they'll even drop in like general looting of chests and stuff like that in different camps, like the vineyard vats in Silverlight by those grape farms. They can drop seeds as well. So you definitely want to be acquiring them as often as you can, especially in the early and mid game. So then when it comes to harvesting efficiently and quickly, when you're trying to gather a bunch of plants, either in your garden or out in the normal world, when you come across something like a cotton farm, there's a few different ways to do it. I'll show you my favorites and then also some of the popular ones in the community that people like to use. So first off, you've got the axes right here. They've got some really cool things you can do, like throwing out the axes with the E ability, just like that, and boom, you can get a nice gathering there. Then you also have a sword, which has a really good Q ability, which is kind of like a whirlwind, very good at gathering. And there's a few different abilities in the game that can gather in a decent radius pretty efficiently. Now, you will hear a lot about this legendary whip right here, this Morning Star whip, because it has a fire ability that will cause burn, and it is extremely badass. It's super cool. I'm going to show you what it looks like, but it's actually not super optimal, and I'll talk about why. Okay, so we've let the garden regrow. It's nice and full, and now I've got my Morning Star legendary whip equipped. Look at the ability right there on the E. We're going to hit an area with a fiery explosion, causing everything to ignite in the area. So you can probably guess what's going to happen. I'm going to use that ability in the center of the garden, and then it's going to ignite fire, spreading to farm the whole garden, and I'll show you what that looks like right now. Very, very cool. You just strike in the middle of the garden. Now it can damage you as well, so be careful if you're super close to dying or something. But yeah, look at that. Boom. Within a matter of seconds, it destroys the entire garden and drops the resources. Now, one downside of this is you do have to run around and loot everything. It doesn't automatically put it in your inventory like using some of the other weapon abilities. So a little bit of a pain there, but it is still definitely super fast. You can just jaunt into wolf form here and then run around gathering everything and harvest it up just fine. So, okay, there we go. We used the whip to clear the garden and then gathered all the resources. But what I want to talk about is if you look in here, look what happened. I only got 1, 2, 4, 5, 6 seeds out of that entire garden. And you'll notice I did only get 1 seed to drop on some of them, even though I've got the attribute here of the increased resource yield not being that base 100. The reason that happens is because when it burns down, you're not actually looting it with your magic find of your resource yield attached to your character. It's burning down passively as part of the environment ignite. And that's why you have to run around and pick it up instead of it automatically finding its way into your inventory. So even though it's super cool and it's something really fun to show your friends by harvesting your entire garden with one little swing of your whip that ignites everything, you are actually not going to get as many seeds by utilizing that method. So if you're worried about still growing your garden and acquiring seeds, you do not want to use the Morning Star because it's costing you a lot of seeds. But now I'll show you the method that I personally use when I'm harvesting the garden, and that is going to be utilizing the Twin Blade. Now, you don't have to use a legendary version. You can simply use the baseline Iron Twin Blade, and that will work just fine. You don't have to use the special legendary like you do in the case of the whip, because with the whip, the baseline whip will not place that ignite on the area that it hits. So you're going to need the Morning Star in order to get that super cool ignition of your entire garden that destroys it all in a few seconds. And the reason the Twin Blade is so great is because you've got the Q ability right here that will toss your weapon to slam down into the ground, and then what it's going to do is kind of boomerang back to your location as it's rotating. And obviously this is super cool if you're able to drop it somewhere, then run away, and as your Twin Blade returns to you, it's going to be spinning and gathering plants the whole time. I'll show you kind of what that looks like. So you want to get kind of in a spot right here towards the edge of your garden, and then place it, and then make sure you get to the end, and boom, it's going to return to you and gather everything in that row. And you can do a lot of cool things with this. Like what you can do is you can drop the sword and then hit a teleport pad and go far away, and then have it return a very long area and utilize that to gather an extremely long crop line of plants. But I like to keep it simple. I like to be able to just kind of run around and do it quickly. But you can definitely do some super fancy things with the Twin Blade, and you will notice that I did get 2 seeds as well. So even utilizing the Q ability, I don't have to manually left click. I'm still going to be proccing the benefit of that resource yield not being baseline, and I will always get 2 seeds instead of 1. But one thing that is super important to understand if you're going to be utilizing this twin blade method is you can't let it hit an unbreakable obstacle really, or else it's going to cause it to hiccup. You'll see right here, if I cast it too close to the wall, it is just going to try to spin. It's going to slam into the wall and break. So when you're doing this, you have to kind of give yourself enough space to be able to gather your whole garden without it hitting a wall. And that's why you'll see here on my garden, I left a little bit of room around the edges so that I can cast these twin blades enough to gather the edges without hitting the wall. That way it'll actually spin back to me without slamming into the wall and have enough room to gather everything even on the corners. And if I flip and try to go the other way, this will be a little bit longer, and I can show you how you're able to do this by utilizing dashes. So I can stand a little bit further away, drop it, and then dash back, and the sword will return the entire way. So I can either farm this the length way or the width way, because you're able to give yourself a lot of room if you're going to be utilizing dashes accurately to have the twin blade return back to you. And like I said, you can also use teleport paths as well, but you can also just do it super simple and move around, and it's able to still farm a large garden just like this. You just back up while it's going to be returning to you, and boom, you can gather everything very easily. Let's go ahead and finish this garden, because there is one more thing I want to talk to you about really quick in terms of the farming method. So let's go ahead and just gather the rest of this really quick. All right, there we go. So remember when I had, I think it was like 6 seeds or something when I used the fire whip method? Let me go ahead and show you what I was able to get by utilizing the twin blade. We've got 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 seeds. I believe I got more than double the seeds by clearing it with a twin blade instead of the fire ignition of the legendary whip. And that's why I said it's so important to utilize a method like this instead of utilizing the fire if you're still worried about acquiring seeds. Now, late game, maybe your end game, you have a bunch of legendary weapons and you just want to do something super cool and fast with the legendary fire whip. That's fine. If you don't need the seeds anymore, it will be a little bit faster and it'll kind of burn everything down really quickly. So go ahead and utilize that to your advantage. But like I said, if you still care about seeds, definitely take the time to go through and gather them with your personal abilities and your personal swings. That way you're taking advantage of the increase in resource yield. And then let's also talk a little bit about actually building the garden area yourself. Now, the garden area that you're seeing right here is plenty big enough. I mean, even if you have a squad, if you're active about gathering this a few times a day, you're going to have plenty of plant resources to get through your data successfully, and you won't really be struggling with any of these resources. But I have seen some people that want to build these massive grand gardens, and if you want to do that, it's perfectly fine, because there is a way to kind of burn through all the excess resource by refining it down into pollen, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. So you really can't go wrong having a ton of it. And you're going to want a little bit to increase your horses and be able to summon in the tombs and stuff like that. So it isn't a bad thing to have a ton of it, but I think about this size will be just fine. And then as far as what growing plots to use, you'll see that I like utilizing these 4 squares because they are very simple to place. They fit together very nicely and they just look very clean, and they're very efficient with the space that they take up. There are some things that are very inefficient with the space they take up. Like, some people really like to use these large growing plants. They fit 7 seeds. I actually don't like utilizing these because if you look, they take up more space and I'm only getting 7. It would need to be more squared off so I can utilize the edges to fit a seed as well. But because of the way it's shaped like an octagon, I'm not able to utilize the edges, and I can't really seem to fit as many seeds in an area utilizing these large plots. And also I can gather 2 rows with my twin blade by utilizing these 4 seeds right here that are able to use the entire surface area and have a nice corner to be a little bit more efficient with the space they take up. But if you want, there's absolutely nothing wrong with just building a bunch of rows of these large plots, because you can see it's basically the same thing as the super fancy squared off growing plots that I'm using. You can just drop a bunch of rows of these and effectively achieve the same thing. So don't worry about it a ton. You can drop the normal base growing plots, or you can make it a little bit fancy and try to utilize something like I've done here with these 4 square plots, and just try to kind of be efficient with the space that you have available to you to fit as many seeds as possible. Now, as far as growing trees in your garden to harvest wood and stuff like that, it's not super important in V-Rising. It's really easy to go gather thousands of wood kind of right next to your base or just out in the world, and utilizing your axes and just going out and chopping wood for a few minutes, and you'll have plenty of wood. So it's not near as scarce of a resource as trying to farm the plant resources that you grow in your garden. But one thing I do like to do for sure next to my garden in a small area is make sure I have access to gloom wood consistently and chop these down. And the reason I like to have gloom wood specifically in my base is because it is going to allow me to constantly have an influx of mutant grease, because when you put your gloom wood into your sawmill, the byproduct is not going to just be sawdust. You're going to actually get wooden planks and mutant grease. And I can show you this by popping into the sawmill and then dropping some of that gloom wood right there. You can see the byproduct on the bottom is wooden planks and mutant grease. Now, you're always going to want a ton of mutant grease. It's actually one of the more important things to farm in the vermin nest. I'm sure I'll do a guide on that at some point. But as you can see right here, it's going to pop out with 2 mutant grease, and I like to chop those down every time that they're available, because I do want to add up as much mutant grease and start stacking that as much as possible. But as far as like the regular trees, I'm not super concerned, because when I'm doing playthroughs, I've never really been bottlenecked for regular wood or anything like that. And there is other wood in the game that can produce a byproduct that is super valuable, like oil, for example, from the hollowed wood, but it doesn't have a seed that you're able to get to plant in your base. Otherwise, I would definitely plant that. So the most valuable one as far as trees are concerned that I'm able to actually plant in my base is going to be this gloom wood that produces the mutant grease. So I go ahead and add that to my garden most times. Which, by the way, I'm just dropping things super quick to show you here in the video, but you always want to take advantage of these things up here on the top and get those checked off by having proper rooms and proper areas for your refining stations like your sawmill for sure. Speaking of which, while we're on that subject, I'll drop a loom and show you what I was talking about earlier when I said you really can't have too many of these plants, because they do chop down and refine into pollen, which you can use right here to make coarse thread, and then you use the coarse thread to make scrolls, and you can actually go all the way up the ladder and do very valuable things by refining your extra flowers into pollen, which is going to be done by taking all of those excess flowers that you don't need, and you just toss them in here, and boom, you're going to be getting a lot of pollen. By doing that, you'll have more pollen than you could ever use. Actually, the bottleneck here in this process of the loom producing the coarse thread is actually the plant fiber, believe it or not, because you can't really harvest plant fiber in your garden, but that's what you're going to be typically utilizing all of those like lesser tier flowers and plants that you're harvesting that you don't need all of the thousands of excess of. You're typically going to be turning it into pollen. And remember earlier when I talked about that chart where I kind of laid out all the different information about these different plants? That is why you'll see under the seed value column, I've got a few of them listed as high. I don't have any of them listed as low, because V-Rising did a pretty good job of at least giving some purpose to basically everything. So there's really nothing that's like complete trash and you never want to plant this at all. You do want a nice influx of kind of all these plants. But the morning lily is very valuable because you're going to be utilizing that a lot in your tombs to farm up a bunch of bones and stuff like that. So you do want a good stock of morning lily. That's why you see in my garden, I've got 2 rows on the left side of all of the morning lily. And then the other ones that are high are cotton. Pretty self-explanatory. You're going to need a lot of cotton yarn on your playthrough. So that's why I have 2 rows of cotton as well. And then ghost shrooms are very good because you're going to be needing a lot of ghost yarn late game, but you don't really need masses of anything other than like morning lily, grapes if possible, but it's hard to get a lot of those seeds. And like corrupted flowers you're going to want for constant weapon coatings on your stuff, but it's hard to get those seeds. Not as hard as grapes maybe, but it's hard to get those as well. So the 2 that you really want to mass and are realistic to mass are probably morning lily and cotton. But if you can get the other ones in mass that are high value, definitely do it. Plague briar, another good one that's good to mass, because you're going to want a lot of irradiant gruel, to get those high percentage prisoners. And you can also use it to summon mosquitoes and the vermin nest, which can be a good source of rounding out your different blood options when you haven't been able to capture high percentage prisoners yet. So yeah, anyway, like I said earlier, I'll have this chart available for you if you want to jump over on the Discord and let me know. I will pin it there or something so you can have this whenever you want. But that's some of the logic as to why, certain things, like I have 2 rows of morning lily and not blood rose and 2 rows of cotton and stuff like that. Now, ideally, I would want 20 rows of grapes, but it's kind of hard to mass these seeds. So definitely get those, because especially if you're playing with a squad, you will burn through grapes like no other, because especially now that you can mix blood, you're going to be needing 2 blood potions for every 1 mixed. And I've seen squads burn through thousands of grapes in 1 night of playing. When you're doing a lot of PvP and a lot of tough boss fights, you burn through those blood merlots like no other. So definitely mass those grapes. Even though you only see me here with 1 row, some of these are beneficial to get a lot more of for sure. And that's why it's so important to check these vendors. Again, I'll have the list on that sheet for you if you would like to have that, of all the ones that drop certain seeds within their loot table. The more important one to check is probably this city urban vendor on the center left of the Bright Haven Trade District, right here where my map ping is. If you come into the herb and potion vendor here in Silverlight, it has a chance to drop these super important seeds like Plague Briar and also grapes. So you'll also notice up on the top right of a vendor, you want to pay attention to the new goods section, because right there it says new goods in 40 minutes. So what I would do personally is definitely scoop up the Plague Briar seeds and possibly the Ghost Shroom if I need them. But I would be a little bit bummed out there's no grape seeds. What I would be looking to do is check back in 39-40 minutes, right on the new cycle of the loot resetting here at the vendor, especially if I'm on a PvP server where other people are going to be checking this. I want to be there as soon as possible on that new cycle to try and make sure I am buying the grape seeds and the important ones like Plague Briar, because these are worldwide. So if you're on a PvP server and there's 50 people logged in right now, odds are someone else is going to be trying to come here and buy the valuable seeds. So you want to check it new on the goods cycle. Also, one thing I want to quickly mention before we wrap up is these bleeding heart plants right here. These are very hard to get in terms of the seeds, because you really can only get them from a lucky drop on a blood treant or lucky loot. So you're going to want to be going around the ruins of Mortium and destroying those plants with your weapon as often as possible to get enough seeds, because you can't buy them from vendors or anything like that. So it's very hard to acquire those seeds. Usually in most PvP servers that I've been on, for a lot of the squads out there, bleeding heart seeds are the ones that they acquire last and have the least of. So you do want to take advantage of destroying those bleeding heart flowers when you come across them in Mortium, and give yourself enough rolls at the loot table of dropping those seeds for you. But yeah, if you have any questions, drop it down in the comments and I'll do my best to answer it for you. And also, if you have any other pro gardening tips or things that are great to consider, leave a comment and I would love to learn from all of you out there as well. And if you would like to join the Discord server and talk with me, ask questions, or just theorycraft things, I'm making a new server, so it's not going to have a ton of people in it yet, but we'll continue to grow it as we do more content and interact with each other and start theory crafting on the different RPGs we're playing. So yep, cheers everybody, thanks for watching, have a good day, peace.